Okay, so we've made a pretty good case of what moiré is. Let's talk about the next step, the logical next step, which is how do we avoid it?
Exactly. Well, the easiest and most straightforward method of avoiding it is avoiding things that will give you moiré patterns, right?
Right.
So if you're shooting, say, an interview, you might want to put that talent in, a non-tight pattern pinstripe kind of shirt. You might want to put them in a solid shirt. You might also want to, say you're shooting, say, brick or some carpet or whatever, you might want to do things like shoot it at slightly different angles. Because again, the position of the camera to that pattern is going to influence how obvious that moiré pattern is.
Well, and to that end, I think pre-production can solve both of these.
Yep.
We'll send out a sheet, a call sheet to our talent with instructions on wardrobe. And we'll also emphasize, even if we're working with non-professional corporate talent, please bring an alternate set of clothes with you.
Absolutely.
Clearly spell out, avoid these sorts of things. And if we're doing a corporate shoot, we'll actually have a couple of ties in the bag just to swap out with the guys. Or, it's not just ties. We might say to the women, could you please remove that complicated fancy necklace? It's giving us a problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you want to give people some warning that you're going to do this. And then for those type patterns, like on exteriors with brick and things, going there ahead of time and doing a test shoot. I know that, for example, a lot of shows and music videos are starting to use DSLR. But as a fallback there, people may have a secondary camera. Maybe it's an AVC HD or an HDV or a typical CCD type camera. And for that one shot, they might have to switch to older technology.
That's true.
Or some of the things that I've done is just shoot a still of it and then do an effect later, like composite in a moving sky on that still photo, and it looks like it's moving video.
Well, right, but even with that said, there's a lot of fancy things you can do, but you can also go a little old school with it, and one of the things that we can do is filter the lens a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So one of the ways that you can avoid moiré is by sort of slightly softening or diffusing the image just a little bit. Things like Pro Mist filters work pretty well to get rid of some of that, some of that tight patterns that you might get. There's companies like Zeiss even that are making specific anti-moiré filters now that go on there. They don't really make the entire image soft. They just sort of focus on diffusing those tight patterns, and they work pretty well.
Well, one of the things I also found too is that the patterns will show up at different points, especially with the zoom lens.
Yep.
So we were doing some work where we had to shoot a lot of iPads and electronic screens. And that's another thing where you'll see the moiré because you're dealing with a screen that's lots of little
Tiny little pixels, yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, I guess that really is a bunch of little dots with a repeating pattern that vibrates.
Sure.
We found by simply adjusting the distance of the camera from the screen that sometimes different zoom levels would clear it up, or just going like, and I mean a hint, like from tack sharp to sharp.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just roll that focus enough, it's like, oh, it's gone. This typically shows up in things that you don't need that distance. And remember, if you are dealing with things like brick, or maybe it's a screen window behind the person, sometimes you could move them off angle, you can pull them further away, and then change your lens to change the compression of how far away they are and just adjust your zoom. There's lots of strategies for changing how you shoot this to get rid of it. And if that doesn't work, then it's either switch the camera or take advantage of one of these hardware filters that either go on the front of the lens or between the lens and the camera body.
Well, one more thing about switching the camera that I think is interesting is that as these cameras mature and the sensor development gets more mature in itself, we're seeing less problems with moiré, right?
Yeah.
The very first generation of DSLRs, maybe this was a little more pronounced. The second, now third, fourth generations, it's getting less and less. As issues like line skipping and some other artifacts and sort of what's really going on with the sensors get sort of, fixed or eliminated altogether, those problems, we're seeing this less of an issue. I will say, having owned, 5D Mark II and the 7D, and having played with the 1D Mark IV on the Canon side, and the same thing on the Nikon side, as the cameras are maturing and they, each successive generation, we're seeing better moiré performance.
Well, we're also seeing a rise in popularity of crop sensors for people that are deciding to shoot video. Now, for example, if you look at like the Panasonic AF100, it's not a full frame sensor. It's a crop sensor. It's like a Micro Four Thirds.
Right.
And we're seeing this with others. Like people are going, oh, you know what? That giant full frame photo sensor might be too big.
Right, sure. So, again, I think at the end of the day, the thing to understand about moiré is that you can avoid it in a couple different ways. Avoiding those tight patterns, adjusting your angle, zoom to patterns if you have to shoot them, right? I think that you can think about diffusing methods, either through something like a Pro Mist or some of these special filters are out there. And then also, I hate to say this, you might need to upgrade your equipment. If your equipment's 4 or 5 years old and exhibits these problems greatly, you might think about the newest and latest generation of cameras that are much better at handling strong Moiré patterns.